A conversation that pops up from time to time in my Twitter feed is a debate about what makes a story gritty or dark, and this conversation got a resurgence in the wake of Zack Snyder's Justice League's release on HBO Max. There's a consensus among some that for a movie to truly reach those peaks of dark and gritty, it must be serious and grim throughout, and I disagree with that take. So today's video essay is going to look at one of the darkest shows I know, Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal. But first we should discuss grimdark. Grimdark is a genre dedicated to, being grim and dark. Often set in a twisted world where the line between hero and villain is blurred at best, grimdark stories tend to be filled with blood and cruelty. The unique characteristics of this genre closely match the above thoughts on serious stories. No humor, no light, just a bitter fight to a morally ambiguous end. Grimdark stories have their place and are quite good, but to say that a gritty story equals a grimdark one is false. So let's look at Primal and how the Samurai Jack creators show establishes and maintains a dark narrative. Primal wastes no time setting up its high-stakes life-or-death narrative. The opening episode introduces us to the main characters Spear and Fane, a primitive human and large dinosaur respectively, right after a particularly hungry dinosaur consumes their families. This is a show that starts with the death of children and hatchlings. It's easy to look at that premise and assume that the show is endlessly dark and gory, but that simply isn't true. Episode 1's first scene finds Spear fishing before getting attacked by a gigantic alligator capable of swallowing him in a single bite. This scene provides a great micro snapshot of the show: tranquility, death, and danger. Primal is a fight for survival in a world that doesn't want you to survive, and this opening does a great job of cementing one of the most important lessons in the show. There's always a bigger threat. This is a brutal world. Even the characters' names reflect this. Spear and Fane aren't named for their appearance or species. They're named for their weapons of choice in this hostile world. Primal isn't just wave after wave of gore. There's beauty, tenacity, and grace in its storytelling. There are not casual deaths in Primal. The violence is centered around necessity, generally either killing to eat or to avoid being eaten. Primal never revels in its violence, however. More often, it's portrayed as tragic and makes no allusions to it being fun. Perhaps the best episode to demonstrate this is Primal Season 1, Episode 3, A Cold Death. The episode opens on an old woolly mammoth, well past his prime and fading into the confines of a blizzard as his herd moves on. There's a quiet dignity to the mammoth struggling through the snow. We feel for him, with patches in his fur and a missing tusk. Then Spear and Fane attack. We've seen them hunt before. The previous episode was about them killing boars and fighting over who got the food, but this fight is different. This is tragic. We see the fight from the mammoth's perspective, a sudden assault at the end of an already weary life. The tragedy is deepened when Fane remembers teaching his son how to hunt, and we see the empathy father and son display as they recognize their prey's death is needed, but sorrowful. Spear and Fane don't kill the mammoth for fun. Both of them need meat, and Spear needs its pelt to survive the harsh winter. The episode continues with the slain mammoth's herd discovering his body and following Spear and Fane to the cave where they made shelter and attacking. This hunt changes the perspective of the show. This episode has never really been about Spear and Fane. It's been about the mammoth herd. In this episode, they're the interlopers, the villains who killed a member of this community, and they will pay. In the end, Spear and Fane prove no match for a herd of woolly mammoths, which isn't all that surprising. But they live because Spear offers the fallen mammoth's tusk, which he had used to build a sled to carry the meat he had harvested. This fight ends not in bloodshed, but in empathy, as the mammoths accept the peace offering and bring the tusk to an elephant graveyard and mourn for their lost brother. A Cold Death isn't really about a fight against a mammoth herd. It's a story about community and empathy, life and death, and it's told through the lens of a bitter fight for survival in a freezing winter. This episode highlights Primal's greatest strength and storytelling, contrasting the death of the world with its quiet moments of life. Contrast is where Primal's story really comes together. For every moment that is a bloody, vicious struggle for life, there are also quiet moments. Times of empathy and community and joy. Sometimes these moments are small, like when the ape-man returns Spear's spear in the first season. Other times, these moments make the episode. In Season 2, Episode 3, Coven of the Damned, Spear and Fane are captured by a coven of witches who want to use their magic to convert Spear's life into a baby. The pair are freed by one of the witches who lost her own child in a tragic accident, choosing to help Spear and Fane after she magically observed their own tragedies. The only reason Spear and Fane escape this episode is because she shows empathy for their shared loss and wishes they have a life better than hers. There's humor in Primal as well. It turns out the concept of a prehistoric man traveling around with a giant death lizard lends itself to humor quite well. This illustrates how Primal crafts its story. By contrasting the violence with these light moments, it adds texture and contrast to the show. If the series was an unrelenting sequence of action, blood, and death, Primal would become a meaningless gorefest, and the show would become a single, dull tone. But these contrasting moments add texture. There's an episode in Season 2 where Spear and Fane are pursued by a zombie dinosaur that burns apart in a lava field after trying very hard to kill them. But when it's gone and reduced to ash floating on the breeze, Spear mourns its death, mourns the life that had been before the madness overtook it. Putting in quiet moments of humor and contemplation don't detract from the show's dark, serious nature. Rather, they enhance it. These moments give meaning to the violence, to the struggles Spear and Fane face to simply survive in this magical, hostile world. And the bloody bits give context to the bright ones, making every victory greater because our heroes have something to live for. Adding moments that aren't always serious and grim doesn't ruin Primal's dark, gritty narrative. It makes it stronger and turns a story that could have just been a parade of spilled guts into a story that reminds us no matter how horribly brutal and primal the world may seem, there's always an oasis to fall into.